Hello dear students, welcome to this program. In today's program we are going to discuss about the philosophy of Upanishads with special reference to its concept of self and identity. The main objectives which we are going to achieve are to discuss about the philosophy of Upanishads. We will be trying to know about different types of Upanishads. We will try to recognize the difference between the Vedas and the Upanishads. Also, main attributes of Upanishads, and lastly we will be trying to understand the concept of self and identity in Upanishads. To start with, the Upanishads represent the culmination of the Vedic literature. The Upanishads are referred to as Vedanta in two different contexts. There is one meaning to the first sentence. The term Vedanta also refers to the climax of Vedic thinking. We discovered via our investigation that Vedic philosophy evolved through two further stages, the Brahmans and the Aranyakas, before starting in the age of mantras. The Aranyakas, the stage that came after the Brahmans, implemented corrective measures even if the text and spirit of the Brahmans did not actually develop from the period of mantras. The Upanishads' development was facilitated by reflection and self-correction. It is considered that the Upanishads are where Vedic thinking culminated and matured. Upanishads are considered as the end of the Vedas. One Upanishad's idea had a significant influence on later Indian philosophy. Contrary to what early Western historians claimed, the Sanskrit word Upanishad did not initially refer to a group of students gathered around a teacher or to sing around. Instead, it was used to refer to the homology between aspects of the human individual and heavenly entities or energies, which gradually became central features of Indian cosmology. Its meaning was connection or equivalence, and it was utilized in this context. The term Upanishad also came to be connected with a genre of textual works that purported to reveal hidden teachings in the middle of the first millennium BC. Since this homology was at the time thought to be an esoteric theory, the Upanishads depict an interconnected universe with a single overarching principle that underlies the seeming diversity of the cosmos and is known as Brahman in any expression. The Upanishads assert that Brahman exists in the Atman, the constant center of the human being. In this situation, the essential teaching of the Upanishads, according to many subsequent Indian theologies, is the comparison between Brahman and Atman. From the middle of the 5th century until the 2nd century BC, 13 Upanishads are documented. Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, Taittiriya, Atreya, and Kaushitaki were the 5, and they were written in prose with verse interwoven. Kena, Katha, Eza, Svetas, Vatra, and Mundaka were the middle 5, and they were mostly composed in verse. Prasna, Mundakya, and Maitri, the final 3, were written in prose. Now let us understand the concept of Upanishads. The opinions of the commentators vary on this subject. They offered generally unaccepting explanations when asked what this phrase meant. There have also been cases where some of the Upanishads' most important quotes have been taken as the text itself. If this is the case, then the rest of the text is just a single assertion being explained. The best course of action is to begin with the etymological meaning. Remember too that etymological meaning alone won't get us very far. The words upa means near, Nai means devotion, and Sat means sit. All make the term Upanishad. Rearranging just means to sit close to the Guru with devotion. The word near has a deeper meaning in this context, which is significant. It demonstrates that not everyone is welcome to follow the Upanishad message. The instruction will only be given to those who deserve it. In each case, the ability of the student comes first when determining what should be taught in any educational institution. It should be remembered that Pythagoras in classical Greece adhered firmly to this rule. The Upanishads are the primary source of information for the Vedanta school of philosophy. There are several subsectors of it, including Dvaita, Advaita, Vaisheshdvaita, Dvaita Advaita, and others. All of these schools agree that Brahman is the most supreme reality and that everything in the universe is this manifestation, emanation, or projection, signifying a parallel universe or an illusion, means Maya. By practicing dharma and carrying out God's eternal tasks on earth, we can spiritualize our life and find liberation by comprehending Brahman and our relationship with Him. The Upanishads are regarded as the ritual manual for carrying out numerous Hindu rites for the Brahmanas. However, the writings pass on a view that appears to be opposite to the ritual, raising some doubts about the true thinking that was intended to be transmitted. The ceremony and its severity has been attacked by older versions of the Upanishads. Here are some of the ideas the Upanishads transmitted about various rites. Brihadaranyaka Upanishads. This Upanishad states that everyone or anyone who attempts to worship any other divine creature but oneself is considered to be a domesticated animal of the gods. Koshatiki Upanishads. Here the significance of rituals like Agnihotram in promoting introspective reflection was emphasized. It was also asserted that one should aspire to acquire knowledge rather than to do rituals. Chandogya Upanishad. Parodies for numerous human sacrifices were included in this edition of the Upanishads. Mandala Upanishad. This sheds light on rites' darker side. This describes the procedures through which people are summoned after being promised particular things in order to deceive them into performing a sacrifice or ritual. This highlights the pointlessness of some rituals in man's life and improves awareness among youngsters and people of scams carried out under the cover of rituals. Next, Maitri Upanishads. It talks about how a sacrifice causes a Brahman's knowledge to end as well as how meditation can help a person learn. Now, importance of Upanishads. The Upanishads hold a special place in the development of Indian intellectual thought. They provide the most reliable foundation upon which India's numerous philosophical systems are built. As a result, the Upanishads and Vedanta philosophy are strongly interconnected. Not only the Vedanta philosopher asserts faith in the Vedic ideals and purposes, but also the Sankhya, Vaisheshika, Nyaya, and Yoga philosophers assert that the Upanishads provide some support for their theories. The Upanishads are connected to the Vedas, completing the Vedic knowledge spectrum to the fullest extent. The Upanishads regularly make reference to the Vedas and their study. One of the Vedic hymns that can be contemplated upon is the Gayatri as an illustration. Each of the Vedas has multiple Mahavakyas or wise sayings. However, the Upanishads contain 4 Mahavakyas that are profound, thought-provoking, and powerful and relate to 4 Vedas. This reflects the non-duality of the Jiva and the Brahman. Without initially studying the Upanishads, understanding Indian history and culture is challenging. Every subsequent development in Indian philosophy and religion has been impacted by Upanishads. Now let's understand the concept of self and identity in Upanishads. Dear students, the concept of self or Atman and its association with Brahma, the universe creative force, have traditionally been understood in terms of some kind of idealism, with an emphasis on either pure contentless consciousness, the Nirguna ideal, or some kind of Hegelian absolutism, Saguna ideal. Such an approach was rejected by both the historical Buddha and the classical naturalist school of Charvaka because the idea of pure consciousness was incomprehensible to the average person and because no satisfactory connection could be made between a transcendent creative principle of consciousness and the empirical world of nature and man. The Upanishads state that Atman or self is the core notion. This term is sometimes translated as body or self, and it reflects a comprehensive and tangible method of thinking that may indicate the actual being, the existent, or the concrete living being. Self refers to the idea of an inner self and an outside self, which are surface level manifestations of life. Atman shows that Brahman desired for his student to understand the self as a temporal response to the central self. It is advantageous to worship the impersonal and non-physical entity known as the self because it is imperishable, has bodies, and resides within the perishable bodies. The self is gained through learning about oneself and understanding knowledge of the soul. All people have self, but it does not shine as a result. Only subtle diviners who are perceptive and gifted with subtle insight may see it. Worshipping oneself enables one to take advantage of the chance to position oneself as higher creatures and to exert control over lesser desires, so enabling self-transcending and self-mastery. Worshipping oneself is crucial in fostering self-realization, which provides a lasting fulfillment of one's inner desires at a time when supernatural religion is losing its grip on us. Therefore, it brings about a great deal of peace and harmony to realize that Atman, Brahman, and the inner self make up the substance of the cosmos and are in fact one. The discipline of proper living or taps, introspection, which entails self-analysis, meditation, and self-inquiry of one's inner self and reached self-realization is what leads to the adoration of oneself. The Upanishads hold that the empirical self and the supreme self are ultimately one. The true self or Atman of a person is distinguished from his empirical self in the Upanishads. The existential self, vulnerable to pain and suffering as well as change, is the empirical self. The unchanging Atman, which perceives the empirical occurrences but is unaffected by them and never dies, is the actual self. The Upanishads hold that the empirical self and the supreme self are ultimately one. The Chandogya Upanishads clearly illustrates this identity through the lessons that Savetkitu's father taught him. The lessons that Savetkitu's father taught him serve as a clear illustration of this identity in the Chandogya Upanishads. Bring a fig from there, here, says his father. Sir, this is it, quoted. Divide that. It has been divided. Sir, what do you observe? These seeds are quite nice, sir. Please divide one of these. Then, it has been divided, sir. What do you observe? Not a thing, sir. Next, he replied to him, indeed, my love from that finest essence which you are unable to comprehend. This enormous sacred fig tree develops. Believe me when I say that the world itself possesses the best essence. Atman is that. That is who you are, Savet Kitu. Do you make me comprehend more, sir? He responded, So is it, my dear. Put this salt in the water, please. Come to me in the morning. He then took action. Then he requested that he bring the salt that had been added to the water the previous evening. He then reached for it, but he was unable to find it because it had entirely disintegrated. He said, Please take a taste of it from this end. How is it? Salt. Take a sip from the center. He instructed. How is it? Salt. He instructed. Take a sip from that end. How are you? Salt. Leave it alone. Come to me then. It is always the same, he said as he did it. Verily, you do not receive being here. He then replied to him, It is in fact here. This entire world is made up of that which is the purest essence. The reality is that, Atman is that. This is who you are, Savet Kitu. The Taittiriya Upanishads have one of the best descriptions of the structure of man. Man's physical body and his Atman are separated. The real man is not in his body because ether, akasa, which is derived from the Atman or the Brahman, gives rise to air, fire, water and earth respectively. Plants are born from the ground. Food is made from plants and man is made from food. Man is a finite being and the Atman is the supreme being. However, the Atman or the man's real self is hidden deep within. What then is the true nature of man? Because the body is empirical, it cannot be the Atman or the self. Which is more important, the Atman or prana? No, it is not possible because even though a guy is not dead when he is asleep, his eye does not answer the phone when we call him. In this instance, his unconscious mind is the problem. Then is the mind the Atman? No, it is not because how a madman thinks, despite the fact that he is not at all like himself. He lacks logic though. So is reason the Atman? No, it is not possible because we do not say that a person is missing when they are asleep because their reason is dormant at that time. Then is the Atman unconscious? No, it is not possible because the Atman must be definition, be cognizant. Although the Atman cannot be compared to or identified with any of these body, mind, reason or the conscious, it is yet present in each of them. We can then conclude that the higher is the Atman of the lower and the higher is the body of the lower. The ultimate Atman is not the physical body of anything, nor is matter the Atman of anything. It is important to note that the Atman, which makes up man, is considered to be an inherent part of all of these things. The polarities and dichotomies that are prevalent in Western attempts to comprehend the nature of man are excluded from such a perspective. The Catharsian distinction between subject and object as well as between substance and spirit is not present here. Here, a holistic viewpoint is used, which has grown to be an important component of contemporary theories on the makeup of the human psyche. The macrocosm is the Brahman or Paramatma if man's self means Atman is the microcosm. Man's internal and external reality can be portrayed in its entirety. The Brahmanas versus the Upanishads clash of classes. The Vedic tradition has an intriguing feature in that the conceptual difference between these two stages subtly reflect some sort of conflict, or if not conflict, at least a difference of opinion between Brahmins and Kshatriyas. The Brahman class followed the Brahmana tradition, but the Kshatriya objected to the overemphasis placed on the yagas that the Brahmanas prescribed. Therefore, the Kshatriyas class is where the Upanishads first appeared. The Kshatriyas developed contempt for the Brahmanical legacy, if not for Brahmins, which is interpreted as the Upanishads' antagonism to the Brahmanas. It is conceivable that they also held Brahmins in low regard. The Rig Veda has suktas that discuss the oppression of the Brahman class by the ruling elite. If this is the case, the ruling class, not the so-called intellectual class, was the source of the intellectual growth's push. Two ideas about life are presented in the Upanishads: Brahman and Atman. The source, center, and purpose of human existence are all referred to as Brahman. It is a universal, infinite, and eternal truth that never changes but affects everything in its vicinity. It is also known as the universal Hinduism's creative principle. The realization of one's true identity and eternal soul is known as Atman. Knowing your own personal life's purpose is the core concept of the Upanishads, which centers on Atman. It covers how to maintain a clear focus in life and avoid confounding concepts like Atman and Brahman. In terms of underlying philosophy, the Upanishads and the Brahmanas are polar opposites. Although Brahmanas are nominally based on the Vedic Shabda, Brahman, their philosophical principles are largely non-Vedic. Do not mock me, I can promise you of that. The first theist school of thought in India was that of the Brahmanas. Rituals, according to Brahmanas, are crucial to the maintaining of cosmos and its many parts. The focus of the Brahmanas is ceremonious. Brahmanas employ the same symbolism to convince people that every ritual has a purpose. Thus, one should undoubtedly carry out the material ritual despite the Vedas' best efforts to represent and highlight the inadequacies of the outer rituals. The Brahmanas were theistic, so it was obvious that they had to acknowledge the sovereignty of the divine revelations, the Vedas, in writing to win theist support. They also began the tradition of misquoting passages from the Vedas to support their claims, which later spread to other theistic schools of thought. Thus, as compared to the Vedas, the Brahmanas represent the complete opposite extreme of thought. They support material rites and simple mantra reciting, both of which are scorned by the Vedas. The Vedas' philosophical offspring, the Upanishads, focused more on elaborating the Vedas in order to generate philosophical ideas. Thus, the Upanishadic school frequently overlooked the rites that were based in materialism and focused on the spiritual and philosophical aspects of the Vedas. The Vedas supported this, despite the fact that it went against all Brahmanic principles. The main drawback of Upanishads is that the complex poetic depth of the Vedas was simplified for lay people. Additionally, Upanishads extrapolate from the Vedas and offer a substantial amount of speculation and hypothesis. However, compared to the Brahmanas, which are same in language but opposite in usage, the Upanishads are closer to the Vedas in terms of their goals. The main distinction between the triangle of the Vedas, Brahmanas, and Upanishads is this. Now, concept of reality and Maya. People often fail to realize the difference between reality and virtual reality of Maya. Reality means people actually notice changes to reality, principles, etc. In truth, the term Vidya refers to the Atman and its wisdom. The constant interaction between the ever-changing Prakriti, parts of life, and the immutable Purusha, elements of life, helps us to understand this truth. Now, Maya, it is frequently viewed as false information. Maya is also a delusion because it is the product of human imagination and is dependent on individuals establishing their own version of reality by seeing the world in their own unique ways. Maya is another historic concept that causes individuals to become sidetracked. Maya is a major concept in Hindu philosophy, especially in the Advaita, non-dualist branch of Vedanta. Sanskrit, magic or illusion. The term Maya originally referred to as God's extraordinary capacity to persuade others to believe a lie. Its extension was later understood to be the immense force that creates the cosmic illusion that the phenomenal world is real. According to non-dualists, Maya is the cosmic power that reflects the unbounded Brahman, the Supreme Being, and the finite phenomenal reality. According to non-dualists, Maya is the cosmic power that reflects the unbounded Brahman, the Supreme Being, as the finite phenomenal reality. Humans' lack of awareness, ajnana, of the true nature of the self, which is identical with Brahman but is mistaken for the empirical ego, is a personal mirror of Maya. Now, dear students, to conclude, the Upanishads are among the oldest religious texts in existence, and they contain a wealth of educational techniques that can be applied to real-world learning. They also express some original ideas about the rights they mention. These passages are both incredibly fascinating and very perplexing. The themes covered by the Upanishads are very briefly summarized because each work builds on previous discussions to foster ever deeper interactions with the material. One example of Tattvam Asi in the Chandogya Upanishads is Shvetaketu's awareness of his own divine nature, which 12 years of religious education were unable to teach him. Another example is Nachiketa's conversation with the god of death. The Upanishads may theoretically be studied for the rest of one's life, and it is thought that doing so would lead one from a condition of spiritual darkness and loneliness to the understanding that one has never been alone because the actual spark of the divine exists inside each soul. Since these 13 works were first translated from Sanskrit beginning in the 17th century CE, writers, philosophers, scholars, artists, poets, and countless others have responded to them. Their popularity has only increased since then, and they are now regarded as some of the finest spiritual works ever created. With this, we complete our today's topic. Hope to see you soon in another topic. Till then, goodbye.